So there's this incredible quote from 1867. A woman named Rachel Haskell wrote about a chore she called the Herculean task which women all dread. Now, she wasn't talking about war or, surviving a long winter. She was actually documenting the sheer, bone-deep physical exhaustion of a 19th century washing day. When we look back at the reality of everyday survival in the past, we really have to get grounded in these visceral human experiences. It was literally a fight for social respectability, and it was entirely mapped through the crushing burden of just trying to stay clean.
Welcome to this explainer on the brutal chemistry of frontier survival. We're going to take a journey from the mud, sweat, and frankly the rancid smells of the pioneer yard, all the way to the scientific breakthroughs that finally liberated the household. What's absolutely fascinating here is the contradiction, right? Everyday people, specifically women, were essentially acting as backyard chemists just to maintain their family's social standing. Cleanliness wasn't just about hygiene back then, it was a desperate, highly visible marker of moral order and civilization on a really unforgiving frontier.
Okay, to really wrap your head around this burden, I want you to consider a single number, 400. That is the staggering 400 pounds of water, we're talking roughly 50 gallons here, that had to be manually hauled for just one single family wash. Remember, there was absolutely no indoor plumbing. Women were hauling this water bucket by heavy bucket, sometimes 60 yards uphill, whether it was freezing cold or a sweltering summer day. And the crazy part, after the wash, all that filthy, heavy water had to be hauled right back out. The physical toll on the human body was just immense, wearing down joints and honestly breaking spirits.
Part 1. The dread of washing day.
Look at the tools they had to use. These things were brutal, and they really show how the domestic environment was honestly closer to a heavy industrial worksite than a modern home. You've got these heavy corrugated washboards, massive boiling kettles, and these things called sad irons. Sad is actually an old word meaning solid or heavy, and they definitely lived up to the name. Weighing up to 10 pounds each, these blocks of iron had to be continuously heated over roaring open fires. Imagine doing that in the middle of a sweltering August. It was a world completely devoid of the gentle push-button ease we have today.
The relentless Monday routine was just a multi-step agony. First, you haul the heavy water. Then, you boil it over open flames. Next, you're scrubbing these heavy, dirty linens on washboards until, literally, your knuckles could bleed. Then, you hand-wring soaking wet fabrics, boil them again with soap, rinse them, wring them out again, then, finally, you starch them and hang them to dry. And if it was winter and the clothesline froze solid, well, you're out there working at the ice for hours. Authors from that time quietly noted that the health of many young women was completely crushed by this pounding, demoralizing drumbeat of labor.
Part 2. Ashes, Fat, and Fire.
Now, here is one of the most wild historical contradictions of everyday life. The pristine purity of those Sunday best clothes, those bright white aprons that signaled moral virtue, relied entirely on the most foul, disgusting materials imaginable. To get things pure, you needed two things: highly caustic wood ash and rancid waste grease. That grease was saved up in a crock for months: bacon drippings, mutton tallow, butchered entrails. To get clean, a household literally had to boil its grossest, most rotting garbage.
So how did they get the cleaning agent out of the ash? They used an essential piece of frontier tech called an ash hopper. Families would build these V-shaped wooden barrels out in the yard, carefully layering them with straw, twigs, and all the hardwood ashes they saved up from their winter hearths. Then they'd pour rainwater over the top. As the water leached down through the ashes, it dripped out the bottom as a brown, highly caustic liquid called lye. And let me tell you, this liquid was so concentrated, it could literally burn the skin right off a careless hand.
Making this lye was high-stakes, trial-and-error chemistry performed right in the backyard. You collect the ashes, layer the hopper, drip the water, and then comes the really tricky part: testing its caustic strength. The stakes were incredibly high here. If your mixture was too weak, your soap just turns into a useless greasy puddle. But if it was too strong, the unreacted lye would literally eat holes right through your family's precious clothing, and it would give you severe chemical burns when you tried to wash with it.
Part 3. The chemistry of survival.
So, without any modern scientific instruments, how on earth do you know your lye is the right pH? How do you know it's not going to melt your skin? Well, pioneer women relied on some pretty ingenious natural indicators. They would drop a potato or a raw egg into the lye solution. If it floated, boom, the lye was strong enough. But there was an even more dramatic test. They would dip a downy feather into the boiling liquid. If the lye completely dissolved that feather away, it was perfectly ready to be mixed with that rotting animal fat. What was actually happening inside those massive iron kettles over those outdoor fires? Well, it's a chemical process called saponification. When you combine a strong base, like that dangerous ash-derived lye, with the fatty acids in the animal grease, they chemically react to form soap and glycerin. These women, without even realizing it, were performing molecular magic. They were boiling this mixture for hours, transforming completely insoluble, awful-smelling waste into a compound that could actually bind with water and wash dirt away.
But the soap they actually made was vastly different from what you and I expect today. Because they were relying on wood ash, they were extracting potassium hydroxide. And potassium lye creates this soft, gooey, brown paste-like soap that you literally had to scoop out of a barrel. It wasn't until factories later started using sodium hydroxide, which is derived from minerals and salt, that we get the hard, solid, mass-produced bars of soap we're all familiar with today.
But you know, human ingenuity is just incredible. Historical records show this absolutely fascinating survival hack on the frontier. Women actually figured out that if they threw common table salt into their boiling pot of soft potassium soap, the sodium ions from the salt would swap with the potassium and chemically alter the structure. It's brilliant! This little trick firmed up that gooey paste, creating a much harder, longer-lasting bar of soap. They were literally manipulating molecular structures with nothing but a wooden spoon and a pinch of salt.
Part 4. Decoding the soap mystery. For centuries, making soap was just this grueling, dangerous guessing game. But then, civilization began a rapid shift. In 1790, a French chemist named Nicolas Leblanc figured out a way to extract cheap, pure sodium hydroxide from common salt, completely eliminating the need for wood ash. Then, fast forward to 1823, Michel-Eugène Chevreul unlocked the actual chemical structure of fats. By the late 1800s, these two momentous discoveries combined to spark the mass production of commercial soap, which, as you can imagine, forever altered everyday human life.
Chevreul's brilliant breakthrough really was a game changer. Before him, nobody actually knew what animal fat was on a molecular level. He proved that fats are composed of triglycerides, fatty acids, and glycerol. So why does this matter? Well, once you know the exact chemical makeup of your fat, you can calculate the precise, exact ratio of lye needed for perfect saponification. You completely eliminate the danger of unreacted lye burning your skin. Suddenly, soap wasn't just this harsh, dangerous laundry tool. It could actually be made mild and safe enough to bathe with every day.
Part 5. The Industrial Soap Revolution. Having these consistent, pure ingredients finally allowed massive factories to just churn out cheap, hard-bar soaps. Brands that we'd actually still recognize today started popping up, and they finally liberated households from the total dread of the ash hopper and the rendering kettle. Alongside all this, the late 19th and early 20th centuries ushered in commercial steam laundries, electric irons, and eventually the electric washing machine. That Herculean task, the one that crushed the health of so many women for generations, was increasingly, thankfully, delegated to machines and industry. Today, we just turn on a tap, pump a perfectly balanced, nice-smelling liquid into our hands, and wash away the day without a second thought, right? But that effortless lather is a serious modern luxury. It sits on top of centuries of grueling, hazardous labor, empirical backyard chemistry, and the immense physical resilience of the women who kept civilization clean against all odds. So next time you wash your hands, ask yourself, could you have survived the chemistry of the frontier? Thanks for exploring this explainer with me.